Welcome back everyone to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial, and in today's video we shall try to equip two swords for our character, so that basically we can use the same type of weapons in different types of slots. So the first thing what I want to do is go to my inventory UI equipment panel. And over here, previously we've set up that this is the armor, this is the arm, and this is the leg. I'm going to change this up a little bit, so both of these are going to be my arm pieces. One is going to be for the left hand, and the other one is going to be for the right hand. And the bottom one I'm going to still use for the weapons, but since I want to have two weapons, let me just duplicate this slot right here. So we have this equipment slot with index 3, and this is going to be with the index 4. So two arm pieces and two weapon slots. Now the next thing what we want to do is go to our third person character and slightly modify some things over here. The first thing that we need to do is add another entry to our equipment, since now we need to have 5 slots. So here we go, 5 elements. And the next thing what I want to do is, since we're going to change this thing up a little bit, I'm going to also change the equipment visuals array a little bit. We're going to basically add 5 entries to this, the same amount that we have in our equipment, so that these values are already pre-made and we don't have to add them, just simply change them up a little bit. Now the next thing what we want to do is specify the index of this array. So to do so, we need to go to our equipment entry node, the function node, and over here we want to add a new input, and let's call this slot index, and this needs to be an integer. Now to make things a little easier with the routing, I'm gonna promote this to a local variable, and let's call this local slot index, so that we can access this a little easier without all the long routes. There we go. So this is all set up. Now the next thing what we want to do is, obviously if we have different slots for our weapons, this thing right here is not gonna work for our socket name. So let's simply delete this part right here. We don't need it. Let's move this attached to component back a little bit, and also let's delete this add node. Instead of adding to our array, since we already have 5 entries over here, what we want to do is set the array element. Now we can connect the execution pins. The item is our S equipment structure, and the index is our local slot index. There we go. So let's move this down a little bit. Now the next thing what we want to do is do a switch on integer, and the selection is going to be our local slot index. So depending on the index, we are going to set up our socket names. Now for our socket names, if we hover over this pin right here, it says that this is a name. So I'm going to add a new local variable, and I'm going to call this socket name, actually local socket name, and the variable type of course is going to be name, since that's what is required. We can use the string as well, but then we need to convert it. Now in our switch, let's add a couple of pins over here. So as of right now we have 5 entries. So the first one, let's set our local slot name to be the armor. There we go. Now let's drag this back a little more. Now let's set on all of these indexes right here this local socket name variable. So now we have 5 set local socket names. Now let's see. So in our add item function, we are adding these to be armor, arm, leg, weapon, and those are the types that is going to be used. But in our equipment visual, what we want to do over here is, this is going to be the arm 1, or you can do maybe like arm left perhaps. I'm going to do arm 1, then I'm going to have arm 2, weapon 1, and a weapon 2. There we go. So these are going to be the names that I'm going to be using for my sockets. Now once we are done with this part right here, what we want to do is simply connect all of these executions to attach actor to component. Now let me reroute this real quick. There we go. So this makes it look a little bit nicer. And now the last thing that we want to do is simply plug in our local socket name variable inside of our socket name. So this part should look something like this. Now that since we have 5 entries already by default inside of here, this thing right here is not gonna do the thing that we actually want it to do. So let's change this up a little bit. Let's drag this aside for now. But actually we might already simply just delete it. So let's see. From the false, what we want to do is drag in our equipment visuals. We want to get a copy using our local slot index as a index in this array right here. Then from here we want to split this pin to get the values out of our array. And then over here what we want to do is simply destroy the actor. There we go. So this is going to destroy our equipment piece visual side of it, and we also want to set this index. So let's again drag in our equipment visuals, and let's set array element using index as our local slot index. There we go, and we can leave this item to be empty, and that's going to create us a default empty entry inside of our array. And now basically all of this that we created in the previous video can simply be deleted. We no longer need it. Some of you might be wondering why we didn't do this in the previous video. Well, this is because I want you guys to see my thought process on how I work on things. I start small and then I basically optimize things and work my way up. My goal with these series is to make sure that you no longer have to watch any other inventory tutorial, so that basically this would be the only tutorial you would ever need, and you would see multiple ways how you can approach things to make and create your results. But if you want to have a finished project and you don't like watching me giving you all this information, you just want to cut straight to the chase and get the finished project, you can always support me on Patreon and download these projects once they are done. So now we have set up this visual function. Now we need to pass along our slot index. So let's go real quick to our add item to equipment function, and like I said, I'm gonna remove the leg piece. So let's remove this node right here. And let's add another pin since we have 5 entries. Now 0 is the armor, 1 and 2 is going to be the arm, and 3 and 4 is going to be our weapon, like so. Now if we go a little bit to the right side, you can see over here we have our equipment visuals function that requires the slot index, and the slot index can simply come from the local index, like so. And now we are passing along the required information. Now one more place where we want to set this up is in our remove amount index. We have our equipment visuals function, which is not equipping, this is unequipping our visuals. So over here what we simply want to do is connect our local index to the index over here or index over here, basically to this entry right here. Now that all of this good stuff is all said and done, we can now go and create our sockets based on the names that are in this switch right here. So let's look for our skeletal. So character mesh skeleton. There we go. So now let's see, we have one socket in this hand right, which is a weapon, and let's rename this to be weapon 1. Now let's look for the other hand, which is the hand left. Let's right click this, add socket, and let's rename this to be the weapon 2. Now to perhaps make things a little bit easier, in the previous video we just simply dragged this in somewhere. I noticed that my weapon is not aligning just perfect. So what we can do here is right click on the socket, add a preview asset, let's add our battle axe, and we can see how this is setting up to look at the end of it all. So let's simply adjust this a little more to our liking. So now I've set this up. Now let's go to our other weapon 2 socket. Let's again right click, add preview of asset. Let's add our battle axe and let's adjust it to the way we want it to be. Now if you watched the previous video and followed along, you rotated your mesh inside of the actor and not the not the socket itself. So what you want to do, in my case, as of right now, if we would perhaps press play, let's see, does it work as of right now? Yes, it does. You can see the weapon is back the other way around like it was at the beginning. So make sure that in your equipment battle axe actor, you rotate this back to the default values like so. There we go. And I also want my weapons to be a little bit lower, so I'm just simply gonna lower them. Now back in our skeletal, let's add two more assets to this. So let's see, we want to use, I believe, this bone right here. So if we rotate this part, yes, there we go. If we want to attach something to our character, we gotta make sure that we attach this to the bone that is moving the part of the character that we are attaching the thing to. So basically, if we want to attach our thing arm piece around here, we want to use the bone that is moving this whole part. So basically this bone right here, in our case the lower arm right. So for this one, let's right click, add socket, and this is going to be the arm 1. And for this one, again, I'm going to add a preview of asset, and this is going to be my wristband. So let me again align this real quick, so make sure you do that, and once I'm done we shall continue. So I have aligned this one. What you sometimes want to make sure of is that you select your preview scene settings, and you want to change the preview of control from default to use specific animation, and then select a animation, let's say run, and you want to pause this to make sure that this thing is not overlapping anything while it's in the animation, because sometimes when the thing is static it does not overlap anything, but sometimes when it's moving it does overlap. So make sure it's not glitching out your animations. And also, now that I have my animations turned on, you can see my weapons are a little bit out of their location that they are supposed to be in. So what I want to do is just simply select the socket for the weapon and just align it a little bit better to where I think it looks the best. So now the last thing that I want to do is, again, so we have attached one arm piece, and let's attach the other one. So let's select the lower arm left, and again add a socket, rename this to be arm 2. Let's add a preview of asset, and let's align this to where we want it to be. So there we go. I've adjusted all the sockets that I wanted to, and now we can leave the preview of assets actually, because you can see it says preview only. So if we would go to the game now, you can see they do not appear. So now I've created the pickups for my equipment. What we've got to make sure of is that in our item database we have set up everything that we need to set up. So for our battle axe over here, we need to have the actor class of the equipment battle axe that we have, and I don't have one for my arm piece. So let me just select this real quick. So equipment arm. There we go. So now we will be able to equip this, but we're gonna have another small issue, is that this pickup right here is very tiny, and it is really hard for our line trace to hit it. So what we can do to make life easier for us to equip the pick up things, so let's select our item itself, and perhaps let's select a bigger one first. So let's think maybe like a crate. Looks like a good sized pickup. What we want to do is add a, I don't know, a box collision or sphere collision. It doesn't really matter which one we select. Just simply select one, make this fit your likings, and what we want to do is probably overlap just about everything. Make sure that this is overlapping everything, it's not blocking anything, so that we can walk through this, but once our line trace hits it, so that we can actually see this. Not us, but actually the line trace itself. So if we make this bigger, now you can see we have these sphere collisions, box collisions around our equipment pieces. So now it's going to be way easier for us to pick up our items. Oh, I can't pick it up because I don't have enough space. So let's try this on. We have the arm piece. Oh, it's slightly out. So what I want to do is probably maybe adjust the socket, or maybe adjust the equipment actor itself. So yeah, I'm gonna have to adjust these, but you can see that it is working. It does attach to the location it was supposed to. Same goes for the weapons. They are getting attached. Let's pick up the other one, and you can see that our equipment looks like it's working quite nicely. One issue that I had, let's say, so let's pick up this thing, put it on. Well, let's move this to the other slot. Works perfect. And we cannot get this back, and you might be wondering what's wrong, why doesn't it work? It actually does work, and the issue is quite silly. If we would go to our UI inventory, we have this equipment panel right here, and it's very small. You gotta make sure that this is big enough. Otherwise, once you drop the thing on top of it, one of the widgets on top of the other, sounds quite silly, but they are getting overlapped. So now if I have this bigger, you can see it does swap properly. You might be thinking, wait, but you just had issues with your arm pieces. Not only, actually, I had issues with my equipment weapons as well, because as you can see now, these are getting swapped just fine. So that's basically it. That's how you equip things on top of your character. Off camera, I'm gonna adjust my sockets a little bit, and it's gonna look way nicer. But as of right now, this is what I have. You might have to play with your values, your adjustments, depending on your type of equipment. So now basically the series is pretty much over for the base, at least, that I had thought of once I started this series. Now it's time for me to work on your suggestions. I have quite a few of them. So some of the ideas that I had was we want to have a possibility to move multiple items. So as of right now we have 4 logs and we are moving one by one. We need to create a functionality that allows us to move multiple logs at the same time instead of just moving one by one. We need to make some usable items like health potions, stamina potions, whatever type of potions, some consumables basically. We could make a chest, that was one of the suggestions. Also campfire with matches. I have quite a few of them. I have all of them written down. Make sure you leave a comment down below with your suggestions so I can add these to this system. And from now on, we're going to work on your suggestions only, because the base system, I believe, is pretty much down. We shall also have a slot limits later on. We shall have not only slot limits, but weight limits perhaps. There are quite a few ideas still on the table for me, but the base system is down. You can work with this, play with this. If you want to download this exact project that I have right now, you can subscribe to my Patreon, and the download link is going to be there in a few hours. And also, once we are going to be done with the whole project, there is going to be another download link. I'm going to have 2 projects for this series. One of these is going to be this base that is laid out right here, and the one is going to be once we are completely finished with all of your suggestions. Now, since I believe we still have a little bit time, let's work on the first suggestion that I received, one of the first from one of my Patreons. He wants to have, so that we have a socket on the back of our character so that we can equip a weapon on the back of our character. So to do so, what we want to do is, again, first things first, let's go to our equipment variable. Let's add another element to this. So let's remember that the ID number 5, index number 5, is going to be for our back slot. So if we are here in the equipment panel, let's directly add a new pin to this switch right here, and let's set our local socket name, and let's call this back weapon. That's going to be the name in my case. You of course may have back weapon 1, back weapon 2, and so forth. So let's connect the executions. Now let's see, that's, I believe, everything we need in this function right here. So that means we need to go to our add item to equipment, because we need to have another index in this switch right here. So let's add another pin. Now let's see, this needs to have a, since I want to have weapons on my back, this needs to have a weapon type, of course. So now I believe over here we are good as well. Let's see. So we have 6 entries over here. Let's make sure that in our equipment visuals we have 6 entries over here as well. And now that means that we need to have the socket named back weapon. So let's go to our skeletal again. Let's see, we have a backpack socket. So just for the previews, let's add our backpack. Whoa, which is very, very huge, and I believe we scaled this down to 0.1.1.1. Yes, there we go. So this is the approximate location of the backpack. That means, well, he sent me a screenshot, and I want to follow that idea because I really enjoyed it. It looked very nice to have weapons right next to the backpack. So let's see where we are attaching this socket to. So I believe this socket is, yes, this is our spine 03. So let's add a new socket to this, and let's call this our back weapon. Now for this one, again, let's add a preview. Let's use our battle axe that we have right here, and let's make sure that we adjust this properly, and it should look something like this. Of course, you can adjust it the way you want it to be. So we have this side socket. Let's save this. Now let's go to our equipment panel. And so we have this base panel right here, and what I actually want to do is simply add another vertical box. And I cannot duplicate this because this is inside of the border. So what I will do is simply replace this vertical box with a horizontal box. It screws everything up, but that's okay. We can add now a vertical box inside of our horizontal box, then move all of this content right here, all of these horizontal boxes inside of our vertical box. Let's make sure that our vertical box is set to be fill. Let's make sure that all of these are again set back to fill. And now it looks exactly the way it was before, but instead of having just this thing right here, we want to have another vertical box inside of our horizontal box. Let's set this to be fill, or perhaps let's say like this is like 0.5, so this is a little bit smaller, or maybe like even 0.4 I believe should be good. So inside of here again we want to add a UI equipment slot, and let's see, so let's set this to be centered. Set this to be fill, so it's right in the middle in my case. And we gotta make sure that we set our index to be 5. So our equipment panel, select the slot, and the slot index is number 5. Compile and save this, and let's try this out. And now let's try this. So we have our equipment and our back socket, and there we go. We are attaching weapons on the back of our character. Very simply, we can have as many slots as we want. Just make sure we set the correct socket names in our switch in our add equipment visuals. So like always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you subscribe. That helps the channel grow a lot. I'm gonna keep these videos coming every Friday and Saturday for as long as I can basically. Thank you guys for all the support, and see you guys next week in the following videos.